I have my PhD in history, but I'm an expert in whooping it up. Woohoo!
White gloves and dirty documents. That's how this historian gets down. I am JMZ.
I'm a doctor, and my prescription is more shade.
Hello! You're here with me, Casey.
Dr. J. Mill, the millionaires.
Max Spear, waking up from a really long nap.
So we've been absent for a bit, and we're back. We've had an action-packed year. I think our last episode came out on October 1st of 2021, and then we had to kind of have everything grind to a stop.
They are bearing the lead. Please get to it. What has been holding you up?
Max and I are now doctors. So we had we had to finish filing, and we did that while we were getting our Historians on Housewives book to press.
Indeed.
So we couldn't do all three things at once. So we got the initial press packet done. We got the book off in the fall, and then
You people came last. What can we say?
Well, the dissertations then really had a timeline for review and filing.
Yeah, Historians on Housewives came last.
That's it. So anyway, we're going to be here with a new season and soon a book. Woo!
Let me go back to Historians on Housewives had to come last because I needed to be able to look at my colleagues and say, no, they're working on their dissertations. I haven't seen them all year long.
So I'm excited for this episode. We talked to Bret Rushforth and Allison Madar. Allison was with us in season 1, and we're talking to them about the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And we talked to them just after season 1 wrapped. And so now we're already at the almost beginning of season 3. And I believe Jen Shah's trial date is now slated for July 11th. So that'll be coming up. And, but what I love about this episode is hearing about Salt Lake City from people who lived there, who can kind of give us this extra lens onto how these housewives are representative or not of the area. And so let's get into it. Allison Madar completed her PhD at Rice University in 2013 and is currently an assistant professor of history at the University of Oregon. Before coming to Oregon, she spent a year as a documentary editor at the Papers of Thomas Jefferson Retirement Series, another as the full-time book review editor at the American Historical Review, and she worked at California State University, Chico for 3 years. And Bret Rushforth is an associate professor and chair of the history department at the University of Oregon. He is a scholar of comparative slavery and French colonialism, focused on indigenous North America and the African diaspora. Welcome to the show, Allison Madar and Bret Rushforth.
Thank you.
Hello.
Excited to be here.
We're so happy that you could join us today, and I was wondering if you would like to start out by sharing your Real Housewives taglines.
Well, I think I'm going to let Bret take this one. His is so good that I just couldn't come up with anything new from my last visit with you, and his is just really, really good. So go ahead, Bret.
A lot of pressure.
Just like my polygamist Utah ancestors, I deny all knowledge of these 6 wives.
So, Bret, let's get into it before we actually get into it. I know you're from Salt Lake, but we actually don't know where Allison is from. Where are you both from, and how did you meet? I guess where's Allison from, and where did you meet?
Okay, yeah. So I grew up in northeastern Ohio, about 30 miles in a suburb about 30 miles east of Cleveland. and spent my whole childhood and college years in Ohio. Born and raised in a Catholic family, so went to Catholic school from kindergarten through 12th grade as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess I'll tell the meeting story. So we
Sure.
met in the nerdiest possible way.
Okay.
We were introduced by a friend who is an editor, and we were getting together to watch a soccer game, and this mutual friend of ours brought Allison along. And once I got to know that she was a book review editor and I was a book review editor, I had my in. So I started flirting with her by talking about book reviews, and that is the honest truth. It's the most embarrassing nerd story ever, but it worked.
What's that opening line like?
So you edit book reviews much? I don't know. I was asking for advice because I had just taken over as the book review editor of William Mary Quarterly, and she had done the Southern, the Journal of Southern History. And so I just started asking her for advice, and I really did want the advice, but I wanted it to come from her specifically.
Uh-huh. Well played on both of your parts.
Thanks.
That's funny.
That's actually kind of funny because Max and I spent most of our first dates writing book reviews together for our master's program.
Very nice.
Well, there you go. So we're not the only ones. That's great.
Book reviews really are the aphrodisiac of the profession.
Nothing's hotter. Nothing's hotter than a book review.
Casey, I feel like you want to take us beyond this how to score with a historian moment and have us go deeper into the podcast.
So Jessica and Bret, we hear that you guys go way back, like circa Coach Shah and Jen Shah in college days. And so I was wondering if you guys remember meeting and what campus life was like at the University of Utah. And correct me if I'm mistaken, but historian Peggy Pasco taught there when you guys were there? So did you guys know or take classes with Peggy Pasco? So all of the above.
Well, I will give Bret the floor, and then I will mount my counter arguments for whatever story I want to tell about how we met.
Sounds good. Well, so I definitely remember Sharif from being on the football team, and what I remember mostly is his injury. He got injured in his senior year, and it ended his career. And I remember that was a big story because he was, he was really promising for his future and everything. So that's the piece I remember. I never had a class with either of them, but I did have a class with Jessica. We were in Paul Johnson's U.S. History Survey class.
I'm blushing already because I know how this goes.
Yeah, and I was just an idiot. Yeah, I talked a lot because that's just what I do. But Paul was a really good lecturer, if what you mean is like he's reading the draft to the textbook he was writing. And I really liked the class. We read a lot of books in that class, and then eventually we went to a Phi Alpha Theta conference, right, Jessica? And we presented at the same conference.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Yes, that is exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened.
I got it right.
That's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. And then what happened? And then we really didn't see each other until later in the profession, right?
Yeah, years later. You came to the Alejandro Institute in Williamsburg to give a paper, and we talked then. Mm-hmm. And even after that, it was a while, until really quite a bit more recently.
Right.
When we started directing conferences, and you came to Oregon for that African American Intellectual History Conference that Leslie and Curtis put on.
Right. So Leslie Alexander and Curtis. Wow, I blanked on Curtis's last. Austin. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to say Adams. They put on this great conference. I was actually a last minute ad. I said, it's just up the street. So I went, and Bret Rushforth has the distinction of being one of the only people that has said, as they've announced me, and someone who went to my undergrad alma mater. And likewise, I can say it about Bret, because there's only like me, Bret, and Matthew Mason, I think, that
Right.
is also a professor that, you know, who goes from the University of Utah and goes out into becoming a historian? Okay, everyone. But, you know how you go to, you have the UCLA people, you have the NYU people, you have the Harvard people. They can all talk about, oh, yes, we are alums. Well, we're alums of the same institution. And so that's how we met.
Right.
We go way back. And Bret and Matt Mason sat in the front of the room. And I sat in the back, cutting my eyes at people, wondering, is this for me? And that was it. And here we go. And the historians were born. And here we are now talking about Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Bret, did you take classes with Peggy Pasco?
I didn't. I didn't know who Peggy was until I got to graduate school. And then I regretted not having a class from her because I read her first book in grad school and I loved it. And then I found out she had come to the University of Oregon. And so after my master's program, I applied to work with her as a PhD student at the University of Oregon with her and Jeff Osler. And I was rejected. I did not get in. And so I do like to remind my colleague, Jeff Osler, that I applied to work with him and he rejected me, but now I'm his department chair. So
Dump bump.
Drama.
Drama. So I tell my Peggy Pasco story often. I took her class on women's history. I was probably my second or third year in, and she did this great class on women's history. And at the very end of the class, everyone clapped for her. And I said, what is this? You can be smart and people will clap for you? I mean, a star was born. I was like, wait a minute. I think that was the moment it clicked. Like, oh, wait, this is the thing for me. Like, it took me all quarter long to realize she was actually doing a performance. And I said, I think I can get with this. So, and then later, Peggy is just wonderful. Rest her soul. And then later when I came to the UC Irvine, Vicky Ruiz was very good friends with her. And so we did a few events together. So I then encountered her in later life. Actually, Vicky Ruiz and Eileen Boris put together a special panel on her last book at the AHA. So we were able to give her flowers at the AHA when it was in San Diego.
Was that Relations of Rescue?
No, this is the last one, the one about interracial relationships. I was in her class when the Relations of Rescues came out. This last one is on, you can tell I don't do the late period.
It's what comes naturally.
There we go. So, yes, I did take class with Peggy. Okay, so we've kind of already talked about when Sharif played football. Now I'm switching back. Okay, so I do believe I had a class with them, but I won't, with Sharif and Jen. They sat at the front of the room, but I can't be 100% assured. So allegedly, I took an undergrad class and they were in class with me. But Bret, you've been watching the show, and Allison, you can jump in here too. What do we think about how Coach Shah presented himself, and what do we think about Jen? Let's just jump in.
Allison, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can go first. Well, Coach Shah is a coach. From the moment he kind of wakes up until the time he goes to sleep, he seems to always be in that mode. It seems to be what Jen needs from him, getting her pep talks and all of that. He seems to me a very patient man, and dealing with some of the things that Jen brings to him. Jen, I think, has watched a lot of Housewives, and came to the show knowing kind of who she wanted to be and what she thought she would be, with her, Shaw Squad and all of the dresses and different looks that she brings throughout the season. To me, she is trying to emulate in some ways Erica Jane. In a lot of ways from Beverly Hills, to bring the looks and to bring the attitude every time she walks in the door. So,
okay, Bret, that was a very polite answer, Allison. Very polite.
I thought Sharif was really interesting to watch because on the one hand, he was very patient, but there were times where I felt that the sort of coach talk felt a little condescending to me, where he was, trying to tell Jen what she needs to do. And she seemed to respond okay to that. So I didn't feel coercive necessarily, but it did seem a little condescending. And I think that it wasn't intended that way, maybe.
A lot. Baby?
Yeah, he does call her baby.
Yeah, just so many babies.
Baby. That's like, hey. He just says it over and over. But, the one moment where I really thought that they both were in their sort of vulnerable selves was when she finally broke down. They're in the bedroom, she's in a robe, and she tells him, I'm not strong enough to do this. And then he reveals to her, that he had gone through some tough times and she accepted him during that time. And I thought that was a really kind of neat moment where they both were completely human, completely vulnerable. And, after that point, I saw them in a different light. Jen is an interesting character, obviously. She's volatile and she would grab attention any way she could. But, I also understand, like in the reunions when she was talking about having grown up in Utah as a woman of color. I mean, I can't tell you anything about this, Jessica, because obviously you have insight about this that I'll never have. But I really could understand what she was trying to convey and what everyone else in the room was completely overlooking and ignoring. Right. That, she grew up just kind of having to fight for everything. And, that's kind of the mode she adopted.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I'm actually glad we can talk about this because, there's very early on, she talked about people just assuming she was Black because she was, she's Tongan, right? One of her dad's from Tonga. And so people outside of Utah don't understand that in Utah, you are white or you're Black. And everything falls into that Black category. Where I think she was wrong with saying she is Black. That's different than saying everyone assumes you're Black or everyone assumes you're, like with Latinos, everyone assumes that Latinos are all Mexican. But where Jen got in trouble is she was saying that, because I'm Black. No. That's what also got Mary's dander up. But you're not Black. But I can understand where Jen was saying in Utah, you really are only seen as white or Black. It's only even recently there's been a big enough Latino presence that, again, everyone is Mexican because, Utah is unreconstructed. So that was the thing. They're really unreconstructed. I mean, with Jen, that's where I said, okay, too far because I get it. I get growing up as a woman of color in Utah and you always have to fight. Oh my God, all your life you have to fight. But I also wonder if she was blurring certain things that it kind of set me, it kind of set my teeth on edge when she blurred certain things. And so I understand her tension with Mary. I don't know. Would anyone want to comment on that?
That's really interesting.
I mean,
anyone want to comment?
Before we get into her dynamic with Mary, I wonder, has everybody seen and or heard of the video leaks with Jen screaming at her Shah squad during her reunion prep? Like, so they needed to get her dress ready and everything, and she's throwing stuff and cussing at them, and it is really intense to watch. And I think it just also seemed, at least in the footage that was leaked, that it came very abruptly, so you don't really get like anything that leads up to that moment, but it in some ways tracks with how quickly her changes would come on the show, right? Where she's kind of just chatting and she's okay one minute and the next minute it is, we're at a 10 and it's, a very intense reality TV moment. And so I wonder if this leaked footage is also going to prompt any sort of change in her demeanor in season 2.
Yeah, I read about the footage and this particular blow up. I didn't I didn't, watch or listen to it, but I did read enough of the direct quotes from it to know that it was pretty bad, really bad. It didn't surprise me, just based on what we saw all season, the quickness with which that flip was often switched, but it also, it makes me think that is her more constant state of being than it's not, even though she was presenting something relatively calm for the majority of the reunion. And, people are like, oh, that's not Jen. But I think maybe it might be.
I think maybe it might be, but I also feel like I agree with you, Allison. I think that she did her research, right? She's not a dumb woman by any stretch of the imagination. Oh, no. So she knew what she wanted to do coming into this. And I think for all the women, they kind of crafted, there wasn't necessarily any kind of searching of who I'm going to be. And I feel like Jen rolled out like 5 seasons of personalities in one season. Yeah. I feel like she was, she didn't stick to one, and she rolled out all 5. So I'm almost wondering if with the video leakage, because there's the audio and then there's the video that we just saw last night that I sent to Casey. So there's this moment where she could either be a great asset and we keep her on for the next season, or Bravo might be like, oh, it's time. Let her go. Not in this moment can we have this. It'll be interesting to see what Bravo does.
But isn't Jen and Sharif somehow involved with the production of Salt Lake?
I believe my cursory research revealed that the Shah Productions might have a stake in this franchise.
Wow.
I have not verified it on IMDb, but I do believe that my cursory research revealed that they put up some money. Similar to like Greg and Nene Leakes. Greg put up a little bit of money for Atlanta. So this is unheard of. But this is where Casey and I fall down the rabbit hole and say, well, is this like Kelsey Grammer and Camille? Was he just giving her a little show for something else to happen later? I mean, we have all kinds of questions. See? We have all kinds of questions. You see it now, don't you? Now
I do.
Show.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question, Casey, but we all agree that the outburst was not okay.
What about her relationship with Mary?
Let's have our guests respond. Maybe I'm overreading it. Let's have our guests respond. Maybe I'm too close. I think
on one level, I understood that there were hurtful things said on both sides, right? And to me, this whole smells like hospital thing that everyone's been talking about, the statement itself is kind of bizarre. Like, she didn't even say a hospital, right? She smells like or it smells like hospital. And I can understand someone saying that and someone responding saying, actually that's kind of hard for me because my aunt was just, had this terrible surgery. It was the response to that I thought was way over the line. It was to blame this woman for her own health problems because she didn't drink enough water. She's not healthy enough. And the implications of that, I think, are pretty hurtful. And so I think that's what sort of set things off. It was much more that than just the smell conversation. And so, obviously, drunk Jen, when she talks about, effing her grandfather, that was also way over the line. And once you get those kind of things out in the open, it's pretty hard to recover.
Right. It's really traumatic. I watched Salt Lake, kind of with this era of, is this home or not? But when I'm thinking about it, it really had, there were some really dark moments in the show. And I think on the intro, someone says that there's all this prettiness and it's hiding some dark things. But there's really some pain between those women, and not necessarily between them, but in their own lives. That I don't know. I think we've got a window into some of it. But the hospital smell like hospital. I'm also wondering if Mary also did her research and thought, what is a good one-liner, or what is something that could be epic. And I think then production just kind of said, "Oh yeah, keep pushing this," because it was bizarre. It was bizarre.
Yeah, it was strange. And, to me, I agree with you about the sort of shared pain, because at each moment that they sort of let themselves talk about their marriage a little bit, they both admitted to being pretty lonely and pretty isolated. But also they both hinted at, how difficult it was to be women of color in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And they had that in common.
Right.
And so, I don't know the dynamic there in terms of, whether there was a sense of competition between them, whether there was a sense of, having to be the standout. I don't know. But it was to me the deepest and most profound tension of the whole season.
I agree. But, I could talk about race in Utah all day long, but there are other things we can get to. But I do believe there was a competition between them about who could be the more authentic Black, right? Was it Jen who literally birthed children, or was it Mary who was raised Black, but also gets uncomfortable if Black men are outside around a store when she drives up? So I definitely think there was a who's more authentic kind of politics going on in a really subtle, not even subtle way, similar to how there was who's the better Mormon or who knows Mormon, LDS culture better. So,
well, and I think we're definitely going to talk more about race in Utah and some of those dynamics later in the show too. So my next question for Jessica and Bret. So I grew up as the non-Mormon kid in the Mormon friend group in California. And so there are many things that I saw on Salt Lake City that felt really familiar. But I was wondering if the show was recognizable to you two as people born and raised in Utah with relationships to the Mormon church. And so I'm sitting here thinking, my friends never, ever, ever drank Diet Coke, but is Diet Coke with lemon a popular beverage in Utah? Did the cast representation of life in Salt Lake City hold up for you or not?
I mean, for me, the person that I most recognized in my own experience with Utah Mormonism and my childhood was Heather. Because she had, I think, the most conventional Mormon upbringing. She went on a mission. She had the expectations of a certain kind of Mormon life. And then when that didn't work out, it was really tragic to her. And I really understood the world she was coming from. And I also thought it was a little silly sometimes when, someone like Lisa is talking about being this, upstanding Mormon, but she makes her money selling tequila and then she's drinking. And I have no problem with making money selling tequila or drinking, but it seems a little bizarre that you think then that, one of the sort of core cultural markers of Mormonism is something you could just completely ignore and still consider yourself, in the core. So it was very interesting watching, but, for me, it was a completely different Utah, except for the little echoes in Heather's life, right? And I guess a little bit in Whitney and Justin's too, because, they are the ones who were, they were also pretty conventionally Mormon growing up. Whitney graduated from high school, from Lone Peak High School, where I could see that high school in my backyard at the time she graduated. I learned this later, of course, just now, but, so, I also sort of know that world. This is sort of in northern Utah County. And that world seemed sort of horrifyingly familiar to me because it's really a troubled place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I need to go back to northern Utah County. Where were you actually raised, Bret?
So I grew up in Kaysville.
Did I not? I did not know that. Okay. By Lagoon,
yeah,
right?
So
one amusement park.
Yep.
Or one amusement park.
Exactly. I was at Davis Dart.
Okay. Okay.
But then for 3 years after my postdoc, I actually taught at BYU, if you can believe that.
Yes, I'm aware of this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was an interesting time. But it was then that I was living in Utah County, so a place called Cedar Hills, which is sort of northern Utah County by Highland and Alpine. That was, it was a glimpse into a version of Mormonism that was really intense and really sanctimonious. And not that all of it doesn't have a little bit of that, but I grew up in a liberal family. We were the only Democrats on our street, and the candidates for governor would come into our living room because the caucus was held in our living room because there were 8 Democrats the entire district. So we were already kind of a weird Mormon family, and I didn't know that. I kind of thought that Mormonism was about caring for the poor and, accepting people for who they are and being generous. And that was kind of what Mormonism was to me growing up. And then I got to Utah County and I realized, whoa, no, this is not actually what most people think Mormonism is.
Right.
And it was kind of a shock. And that's basically when I finally left the church.
Does someone want to prod there, or should we go on? I know what I mean. We're going to come back to leaving the church in a minute. I'll answer Kitty's question, and then I'll come back and prod a little bit. For me, nothing about it was recognizable. I was raised in West Valley City, the WVC, the west side of town, the quote unquote poor part of town, but really I don't want to say no one is poor in Utah. To say it's the poor part of town is misnomer, right? Anyway, some of the restaurants I went to, I had to call my sister who still lives in Utah. She said, yeah, no, we don't go to that. It's some overpriced Italian restaurant. I do want to send the record straight because Lisa has been just drinking her Diet Coke with a lemon. I've tried to explain to anyone who listens that the universal drink in Utah is a Coke, whether it's a Coke or not. Whether it's Pepsi, whether it's Sprite, everyone says, just like other people say you want a soda or you want a pop, the answer is Coke, whether it's really Coke or not. And then the Utah County, my the white family members of mine are from Utah County. Like I was raised in Utah. I was raised for 2 or 3 years in Utah County, and that's where my grandmother lived. And in fact, Bret, where you lived in Cedar Hill or by Alpine or Highland. In Alpine, there's a stretch of property called Carter Ridge. That used to be all my family's property. My family was one of the largest landholders in what is now big Lehi, Utah. Then it was little Lehi, Utah. So I'm very much deep in northern Utah County and the conservative and wacky Mormonism ways. And for some of that, that's also why I respond the way I do to the LDS Church. Like there's the LDS Church outside of Utah and outside of Utah County, and then there's this homegrown, it can be a very cruel culture, very painful culture, very insider outsider. So, wow, we're dark again. Okay, Matt, lighten us up. Lighten us up. Give us something light.
So transitioning slightly, we're going to talk about Heather more in depth in a moment. And then, of course, we'll talk more in depth about Mary Cosby during the second half of the show. But can we chat first about Lisa Meredith and Whitney? What were your thoughts on them as housewives?
Do you want me to start, Bret? Since this is your first foray into housewives ever.
That would be great.
You're doing great, Bret. You're doing great. You're taking it seriously.
I'll start with Meredith. And, the point of being a housewife and putting yourself on the show is to share things and to, might I say, engage. And she didn't seem to want to do any of those things most of the time. Things came out about her relationship with Seth and all of that, but she just seemed really standoffish for the majority of the season, I thought. So I don't know what she thought she signed up for, having cameras all around all the time. But she just seemed kind of uninterested in things. And I understand not wanting to get involved in drama and all of that. But again, it's a housewife show, and that is kind of what makes a housewife show. In terms of Whitney, she was kind of the exact opposite of Meredith, and she shared everything. She shared the good and the bad, and I found the storyline with her father to be very personal and very emotional. And I thought it was kind of brave of her and of him to put their life out there like that, because those are easily things that didn't have to be on camera, or off limits, and she didn't make them off limits. So I thought that was interesting. I also found it interesting how the story she shared about Justin's parents having kind of a line of wedding pictures on their wall, that she him and his ex-wife and his ex-wife and her new husband, and then her and Justin. So I thought that was a little interesting to say the least. And in terms of Lisa, I think she was there for one reason and one reason only, and that is to sell, whatever it was. I think that's just her mode. And I think she likes herself a lot, so she wanted other people to like her too.
Well, can I go? What did you think about her reunion performance? Not her reunion interview, her reunion performance.
It was definitely a performance, and I think what's interesting about this reunion is they had time to think about, watch, and process the whole season for a lot longer than most other shows do before they get to the reunion. And I think they all came with a script, and it all came with a performance ready to go. And hers was to kind of disabuse viewers of the image that was painted of her, she thought, by Heather and Whitney in some ways too. And I thought that she had very clear goals in what she wanted to do, and I found it, all of the yelling just stresses me out. Which, why do I watch these shows if that's the case? But I thought her even turning on Meredith a little bit and all of that, I thought was, not what we saw of her kind of in the, regular season of the show. So I was a little surprised by how she came off at the reunion.
Do you think we're ever going to get to a time when housewives are no longer, what's the word I'm looking for? Where housewives are no longer cognizant of the camera anymore, like in the first couple of seasons of various housewives shows when it was first starting out?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think there's any going back. Because you see in those very first seasons of all these other franchises, and a return in all of these women come in with their own businesses and their own things to sell right away. Whereas all of those things seem to come in seasons 2, 3, and 4 in later seasons. So I don't think there's any way I don't think they're pitching a very clear message, and they're very aware of the cameras, I think, and I don't think that'll change.
I'm going to tell on Max here for a second, but it took almost half the season before he could tell Lisa and Meredith apart.
Oh, I still can't. No, that's not even telling them.
Everyone.
I still can't tell them apart. All the time. We were watching the reunion, and I still did not know who was who, and I think one of them got a haircut.
Well, one of them started blonde. Initially, I think Lisa is actually, I could be wrong, one of them is actually a blonde. So in some early photos, we saw one of them blonde, and then they went brown hair, and then I was really confused. And then, Bret, you can back me up. Secondly, I was confused. Who are all these brunettes in Utah? Who are these brunettes? That is not the type. That is not the type. They look like Whitney. They look like Whitney. Isn't Whitney the type, Bret? Like the slender, the blonde. They look like Whitney. That's why I love Heather. But how did the housewives stack up for you, Bret?
So, I mean, you're kind of, just to build off that comment, the pressures of sort of the ideal Mormon woman definitely go in the direction of Whitney, right? I mean, the blonde, the thin, the makeup, the perpetually young or trying to stay perpetually young. Mm-hmm. And, so it was definitely, she was the most recognizable of that sort of stereotype and that mode. Heather to me was the most recognizable from my actual experience. I mean, even she was way out of my actual experience. I grew up in Kaysville, which is at the time had like 9,000 people in it, and was really almost on the edge of the rural area. And I didn't know anybody who was rich. I didn't know anybody who had pomade brands called Fresh Wolf. I just none of my 8-year-old friends had their own shampoo line, and none of my 20-year-old friends had tracksuit lines. But so, that was part of it. And so with the dynamic between Whitney, Lisa, and Meredith, I mean, I can understand why this is difficult, because it seems to me that Lisa and Meredith had been friends a long time, and actual friends, not just sort of on-air friends or part of a group, but that they had actually gone back. And so anytime you have a dynamic like that where people are added into a group, you can understand on any human level how that can create jealousies. It can create a sense of like, they're talking about me. They have these little sort of inside jokes. There are all these kind of things that I think people felt on the outside of that pair. And that happens anywhere, right? It's not particular to Utah. It's not particular to Housewives. Whitney was interesting for me because, for the first, I guess up until Sharif's birthday party, she was my favorite. And at that, that first half of the season or whatever it was, I related with her in the sense that, she had left the church. There was still a lot of her family and her husband's family that were really in the church, which is the case for me too. And, they had sort of this public scandal, which I didn't have, but I could just understand the dynamic of, how challenging that is. And, then she just starts to seem so young after a while, like just the immaturity of thinking that this is a good moment when I'm completely hammered at, Jen's husband's birthday party. This is the perfect moment to talk about these issues. I mean, it takes kind of a young and naive person to think that that's a good idea. So, I mean, I don't know. That's not really an insight, except it was just my reaction.
Well, no, when I watched the Sharif party, I thought it was true to brand because, LDS people are not supposed to be worldly. They're not this, they're not that. That is exactly when they would choose the time to bring up something inappropriate or whatever. I mean, because it's like you're not processing. We're in a club, people are drinking. So to me, it was actually a little tone deaf, but true to brand in terms of experiences. I want to go back to Allison and ask about Brooks. You said the track line, but I want to ask Allison in particular, what do we think about Brooks and the track line and Brooks just in general? Is it Brooks or Brooke? What was his name?
Yeah, you were right.
Brooks, I think. Yeah.
Brooks.
Yeah.
Not like our Orange County Brooke.
No, they're both Brooks.
Or Whitney.
I wish we
Brooks.
had
Yeah,
that show where Brooks just shows up in Utah.
We could have the real Brookses of Bravo or something. I think I felt like a lot of people felt when, with Brooks on this show is he came on and everyone's like, who is this? He's hilarious. He, has his own confessionals almost immediately, no kids have that right away. I mean, Ace on Atlanta has started to have some. He's so cute, but, but there was questions of, well, did he time his time away from school in a very particular way so that he could be on the show, that he could also take advantage of the spotlight and sell this tracksuit? I think at first I was on board, and then, he got roped in and he fell into the trap of the judgment and the comments that they cause conflict then between Jen and Meredith. Maybe not at the time, but after the show comes out, for sure. I know that they had some conflict over social media about Jen coming after Brooks, and Brooks is 21. He's 22 now. And so for Meredith to say, don't talk about my child, it's like, well, Brooks, he is an adult, and he did leave himself open for some of this criticism by some of the things he was saying and the way he reacted to Jen in some cases. So I found myself at first really kind of a fan of him, and then thought, okay, maybe he just needs to go back to school.
Brooks to me felt almost like a young PK from Beverly Hills, right? It was like Brooks to me so paralleled PK's first season with Pannygate and Erica. And to me, it felt like maybe someone else who'd studied the show and had like a certain, this is how he wants to appear or like kind of be messy in it. And so his discussion of Jen was uncomfortably like PK and Erica and Pannygate.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Bret, something that you said during your description of Whitney struck me as really interesting. I was wondering if you can expand on this if you can. You mentioned that Whitney sort of represents the idealized Mormon wife. And I'm curious to know if you have any insight or Jessica, any insight into if this idea of like, A, what is an idealized Mormon wife, and B, has that idea or has this ideal changed over time?
Yeah, I guess for me, what I was referencing there is more like the ideal Mormon woman. I'm not so sure about wife necessarily, given that she and Justin, hooked up while they were both married. But I do think that there is, throughout the show, there were a few times where they talked about the notion of perfection in Mormonism. And I think they've pulled it way beyond its intent, by saying that, you can have a perfect body or a perfect whatever house but there definitely is pressure for young women to be a certain way to please men. Mm-hmm. I was a Mormon missionary for 2 years, and one of the most disgusting things that was a thing that people said all the time, and I mean I heard it dozens of times, when they're trying to motivate young men, Mormon missionaries to work, they say, the harder you work, the hotter your wife. Mm-hmm. And that was a phrase that I heard dozens of times. It's just disgusting, right? And there's like this objectification that as long as I work, then I am going to be able to claim, some idealized woman, and that she is going to be valued based on how attractive I think she is. And so I think there definitely is a lot of pressure along those lines. And, it's not the Utah I grew up in. I grew up in a much less wealthy, a much less, I don't know. I could say much less superficial, but that's not really true. I mean, anyway, I'm not sure what I'm saying beyond that. But
on the flip side,
so
two different Mormon men at the time told me that I would make a perfect Mormon wife if I just converted first, which was always really weird because I'd be like, "Are we dating? I didn't know we were dating." And but it was a really weird phrase, and I was like, "Is this a phrase that more young Mormon men practice to convert?" Like, it was very strange.
Well, it's always the answer is always, "You're such a good person if only you converted." Right? You're the perfect mate if you only converted, and so conversion's a very big thing. For me, the Mormon perfectionism, and particularly as it relates to beauty, I'm about to unleash all my issues, so we might have to edit this out. Okay. The ideal is thin, white, blonde. I'm neither thin, I'm neither 100% white, and I'm simply not blonde. And so for me, and we keep dancing around Heather, I just feel like I recognized Whitney. I know Whitney. I know that person. I went to high school and junior high school with that person. Whitney got all the cute boys that that weren't necessarily interested in a black woman. And so to me, the perfectionism goes really. It's not just. I mean, it's ingrained. It's ingrained. There's a certain type and then, you know, I'm on the other side. If you do X, Y, and Z, you'll get this husband to do this, and that will take care of you. That was not my reality either. So, you know, again, the deep wells of the pain of a church steeped in patriarchy, weird kind of othering. So yeah, that's it. There is a perfect person that exists, but I didn't fit any of those stereotypes.
Since we're kind of dancing around it, why don't we kind of go there? So usually would talk about a favorite Bravo celebrity, and instead I think we should really talk about Heather as the Salt Lake City breakout fan favorite, much to Lisa's disappointment. But what about Heather is making her a favorite Bravo celebrity? In what ways is Heather so relatable, or maybe not, for people from Utah and, you know, and fans who aren't as familiar with Utah looking in?
I think, you know, I think she's, you know, I could relate to her in some ways, just because she is real, and also because of, you know, I am, you know, now tangentially related to, you know, and have been educated in the world of the LDS church, you know, and so I could see some of these things she's going through, and the things she's talking about with not being accepted anymore and looked down upon. And what I liked about her was that just her honesty and I'm a fairly empathetic person, and the fact that if you didn't know that she had been divorced, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, you would have thought it happened last week. You know, she's just so still very much affected by this divorce and the effect it's had on her family and what she thought her life would be like, and the world her kids are in. And I just thought the fact that she was willing to be so vulnerable, and in some ways, right, was the least aware or the least troubled by the cameras being around and putting on a certain face for the camera, that I thought that was, I just really liked that about her. And so that's why she kind of rose to the top for me among these women in particular. I was less pleased by her reunion performance. But you know, if we're talking about the season itself, you know, she certainly, it was her honesty and vulnerability that really, you know, made her a favorite for me.
Excellent.
Yep. I think I'd agree with that. I would agree with that, that it was her vulnerability, her honesty. I think also it's that she had accepted and embraced herself as a sort of a larger woman who didn't try to always hide that, and was, you know, unashamed and unafraid, even though fans and others have been pretty cruel about it. And, you know, so just the fact that you see her in her kitchen in her t-shirt, you know, hanging out with her kids, she doesn't have to sort of get done up for everything. But to me, the thing that I related to most was this sort of wrestling match that she was in with herself, you know, about, you know, her divorce was part of it, but it was also just a stand-in for a much bigger set of questions. You know, what is my future going to look like? And if you do grow up completely immersed in that culture, you have one idea of what your future life is going to look like, and what you want it to look like, or what you hope it looks like. And there aren't very many models around for you of you know, different approaches. And so it can seem sort of despairing when you you know, face the prospect of being a single mother or being a single father. And she wrestled with that out in the open. And she still was wrestling also with what her relationship was with the church. And that's pretty common for people who, you know, exit Mormonism, is that it's not something you do on a Tuesday and by Wednesday you're fine. It's something you wrestle with for a few years, and then it's a process of a few more years to really kind of figure out your relationship, because it's going to change your family relationships. It's going to change, you know, your social capital. It's going to change how you're accepted, who you can date. And, you know, so she is right that, this is a major, major deal. And, Lisa's dismissive approach to it, notwithstanding, I think that from the world Heather's coming from, she had a really honest and still unfinished battle with herself over who she was going to be, and the fear that she was going to hurt her kids or deprive them of something that she was supposed to provide for them. Was really raw and really honest.
Perfect. That was perfectly stated for both of you. I'm not going to say much more about Heather other than, one time for the bigger girls and one time for the unconventional viewpoint. I think what Bret hit on is exactly true, is that now she has to reimagine her entire life. And Whitney and her husband they actually left the church together. They had a plan, right? Where they were dismissed together. But to be in Utah as single parent, and not of the perfect type, I could see why she has so much anxiety. So this opens up questions about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, colloquially called Mormonism. And Bret, there are a few things from the reunion that Twitter's uncomfortable about. They don't know how to explain. I knew that you were coming on the show, and so you would find the balance between deep doctrine and this is the public conversation. So if you feel comfortable, can you tell us what it means to be sealed and really what it means to be, there's leaving the church and then there's being excommunicated. People on Twitter didn't understand that you actually will get a letter if you're excommunicated. So in broad strokes, but as comfortable as you want to be, can you explain those two things to the audience?
Sure. Sealing is a particular Mormon way of explaining that marriage will continue in the afterlife and that it will last forever. But the belief is that unless you are married by a Mormon authority in the Mormon temple, that you can't be sealed forever. And so there's a real emphasis on, doing the things you need to do to get into the temple, which is a sort of pretty strict observance with a lot of the sort of moral and ethical codes, paying tithing to the church, etc. And the belief is that if you do that and then you're true to it, you'll have a forever relationship. After you die, you're still going to be married. And so when there's a divorce in Mormonism, there are two processes involved if you are sealed. One is the sort of civic separation of the marriage, the legal dissolution of the marriage. And the other is the invalidation of that sealing ordinance, that sealing ritual, right? And they're separate. So you can actually be legally divorced, but the church still considers you married based on that sort of temple ritual. So that's it's just in some ways it's a little more complicated than that, obviously, but that's kind of the short of it. In terms of excommunication and choosing to leave, the excommunication is a process where there's actually a court that is held. It's usually 15 men that get together around a table, and if you're involved in it, you might be able to defend yourself in that setting. But if you've completely withdrawn from it, they'll just have it in absentia. And because he was married, and because he held a position of authority in the church, his adultery meant that he would be excommunicated. And so that's why he ends up getting that letter, which is the church telling him, you've been formally excommunicated from the church. You're no longer considered a member. You no longer have access to the afterlife. Your blessings are all taken away, and you're on your own. And that's you could see how raw that still was for him, even though he wanted to leave the church. There was still something about that sort of declaration that he's not worthy, that he had imbibed that for his whole life, about the need to be worthy and the need to live up to those standards. And And it still hurt him that even though he knew and wanted that exit, that they judged him to be like, you can't stay if you want to.
Right. Right. That actually happened when I was growing up. That actually happened in my neighborhood right down the street. The bishop of my ward and someone in the ward in the congregation, they were both excommunicated because, again, he was in a position of authority too. On top of adultery. Okay, so I think that is helpful because people don't understand those processes, and that was very helpful. But now we are really going to lighten it up, I hope. We're going to lighten it up. Friends, family, people who are listening, we're going to lighten it up. And how are we going to lighten it up, Casey?
Today on our Bunko Party game break, we're going to play a game I'd like to call Clairvoyance. And this is a newlywed style game where I'm going to ask Bravo-related questions. Allison and Bret are going to be a team, and Jessica and Max are going to be a team. And the team that wins is going to guess more of the correct responses logged by their teammate.
Oh, dear.
I'm glad Allison's on my team because I certainly couldn't do this by myself.
Thanks, Max. So it's I'm going to ask these questions, and I want everybody to kind of respond like you think. So you're going to log your own response, right? But then you want to also log what you think your teammate is going to respond, right? Because the point is going to be if you guess your teammate correctly. So the first up, Mary Cosby can instantly pick up the smell of a hospital on someone at a restaurant. Can your teammate? So what do you think?
It's either yes or no.
Yeah, this is a yes or no. So like I would make a column that says, Max, your individual answer for yourself, and then the answer that you would give for Jessica. Or you think Jessica's answering, for example, right? Because there's a yes or no for you, but there's also a yes or no for Jessica. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be about, since it's the newlywed game, wouldn't it be based on what one of us answer?
Yeah, but this is Casey's take on the newlywed game, so you're both answering the same questions.
Okay. All right. Just asking for the audience.
I make my own rules, one Bunko party at a time. Don't forget. All right. Everybody logged?
Yes.
Okay, let's start with Allison. Do you think Bret can detect the smell of hospital?
No, I do not.
Bret, what did you respond for your detection of hospital?
Yes.
Oh, mismatch. Okay.
You think you could detect hospital?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, all
It's
right.
definitely a smell. It's definitely distinctive.
Okay.
You're right. It is.
Bret, did you think...
I've never told someone they smell like hospital, but I definitely have smelled it.
Bret, do you
You've been
think...
to the ER, buddy.
Do you think Allison can detect the smell of hospital?
I put no.
What?
Allison, what did you put?
I put yes.
Oh.
Yes, you can?
I'm seeing a pattern.
Yes.
All right. Jessica, what did you think Max said?
I think he said, no, I don't know what hospital smells like. That's what I think Max said.
No, I said yes.
You said yeah?
Max, what did you think Jessica said?
I thought she said no.
Jessica?
Actually, the no was for both Max and I. I think Max and I both sat together and said, no, we don't know what hospital smells like. So I had no for both of us.
We were like, how can we periodize the smell of hospital? Is there like a specific smell of hospital in the 21st century as opposed to 1898?
It's definitely a 1954 hospital there.
Second question. Coach Shah set up a snowmobiling event. Would your teammate be a great Coach Shah approved snowmobiler, which includes steering? This is a great sign because I'm getting really funny looks from Max. Okay. Allison, do you think Bret thinks that he will be a great snowmobiler?
Yes, I think so.
That is correct.
Woo! Okay, the first official point on the board. And Bret, did you think that Allison thought that she would be a good snowmobiler?
No, I think she'd feel too nervous.
Allison?
That is correct.
Wow. That's a perfect round for you guys. Okay.
We actually talked about this very thing while we were watching, so that's how I knew the answer.
Jessica, what did you think Max responded?
No, he's raised in Southern California.
Max?
Has he seen snow ever?
I put no. I've been in the snow twice, and one of them was in Southern California when it snowed while we were in class one day. And I think it was still like 40 degrees outside, and sunny. But there was snow on the ground, and we got to go outside and make snow. I guess it wouldn't have been snow, but it was like slushy. That's like one of the closest I've ever been to snow. And the other time I went to the mountains, but yeah. No.
Max also can't breathe at high altitude, so he would be terrible. Max, what did you think Jessica said?
No.
Hands down, no.
Yeah.
like everything nature related, I have the ability to, but I'm not going to do that.
I want to watch Jessica though drive a snowmobile.
I can drive a boat, I can drive a snowmobile, but will I is the question. No. So we won that round too. We got points too, Max.
Handedly.
Question 3. Lisa is the Sundance queen. Where would your teammates say they fall in their Sundance awareness? 1, don't follow it at all. 2, they dabble. 3, they look forward to Sundance every year.
Max, look at me. Max, we are on Zoom so we can catch cues from one another. So Max looked at me like he could read my mind through the Zoom.
Okay. Allison, what did you think Bret thinks about his Sundance awareness?
I say 1.
Doesn't follow it at all.
Oh,
Doesn't follow it at all.
Bret?
Am I wrong?
it's a 2.
Oh.
I do check out the listings. I mean, it's not like I've ever been, but I do look at the listings and see what's out.
Will you occasionally watch something with like a lot of press about it?
Yeah. You know, and I used to have the Sundance Channel, so.
Oh wow.
You know that would, but you know, I don't. It's a very light 2, but it's not nothing at all.
Yeah, I
1.4,
think it works for a dabble. What did you think Allison said?
1.
Allison?
Correct.
Woo!
Yeah.
1 point.
1.
Jessica?
I feel like Max is really a 1, but he's got to be a 2 because the two of you together can toss it up. So I feel like he's kind of 1.5 towards a 2. You need a definite answer, don't you? 2.
Yeah. You think, okay, you're going to go 2. Max?
You were so close. I put a 1. At one time, I probably would have been a 2 and maybe even a 3. But since becoming a historian and now especially since we have a kid, like I have zero interest in movies and what is going on at Sundance.
It will take Max and I multiple nights in a row to try to get through a single movie now.
So can I go back to 1? Because notice my 1.5 was dependent on Casey. Max by himself is a 1. Max with Casey's like a 1.5, almost 2. That is what I said. Give me half a point.
So it looks like Casey isn't the only one who makes up the rules.
Absolutely. Have you never listened to the
Story of my
podcast?
life.
Absolutely.
Max, what did you say for Jessica?
I said 3 for her. She knows what everyone's wearing. She knows probably not what the movies are that are going to be slated, but she knows the stars that are showing up and she knows all their drama. So I'm going to say 3 for Jessica.
I'm going to say a solid 3. I will say this with a caveat for all those people listening. Sundance in Utah is like Las Vegas is to the rest of the state of Nevada. None of us really go, but I go ahead and watch all my friends posting, all the glitterati posting, and they're so excited to be at Sundance. And if they only knew that the office for Sundance was all the way down the hill and across the valley on the west side. The actual Sundance office is like by the airport on flat ground. There's no picturesque movie scene. But I am definitely a 3 because I need to know who's wearing whom and so on and so on.
This is excellent. We're at a 3-3 tie for our last question.
Oh my God, this is it.
So there was a lot of fast food featured on Salt Lake City. So what would your teammate say is their favorite fast food drive-through?
My teammates?
Yeah. So what is Max going to say his favorite fast food is? What is Jessica going to say, etc.?
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Jessica, we've never had this conversation.
We have never had this conversation.
I'm embarrassed about this. This is because there's an answer.
That is much worse for you.
I do appreciate that it's a collective oh no cringe. I'll give you guys ready? Or do you need another second?
I'm trying to look through Zoom and see what Max is writing on his paper, but my glasses aren't on and he just covered his paper.
I don't think you're going to get it. I don't think you're going to get this. Sorry.
You're not going to get mine either.
Okay. Allison, what did you think Bret said?
Bret said for me? Or for him?
Yeah, what did Bret say for himself?
I'm going to go with Arby's.
You know, I hate that you're right. And that this is going to be on a podcast. But it's true.
Oh, no. Arby's.
Damn it.
No judgment.
I always did like their curly fries, though.
They don't do them
here's
anymore.
the thing.
They don't do curly fries anymore?
This is actually, there's a Utah background to the story. Arby's, the reason I like it, I mean, it's not like I go there all the time, but
that's not what I heard.
I have to make sure that's clear. Couple times a year. But when I was a kid, Arby's came to Utah, and my mom loved horseradish sauce. And so we would go, and she would, of course, they call it horsey sauce.
Yes.
And the reason is that my grandfather had been kicked by a horse in the face and lost his sense of smell. And so horseradish became his favorite food because he could actually taste it. So this is an honor to my grandfather. Rest his soul.
Oh, now you make me feel like a jerk. Thanks for bringing that up, Max.
Okay, so what is Allison?
I just put none.
And that's exactly what I put.
Oh, wow.
Wow, impressive. Another perfect round. Pressure is on, Jessica and Max.
Well, Max and I aren't married, so that's the caveat. We're not married. So for Max, I was really torn because Southern California, so it would be In-N-Out Burger. But I feel like if he had a drive-up that he loved, it would be more like Starbucks. So I completely plummeted. They're both looking at me like I'm the worst person ever.
Yeah, no.
What is it?
El Pollo Loco.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And they don't really have them in the San Francisco Bay Area. I think we realized there was 1 or 2 at the time that we lived up there. And so, like, Max would want to make a multi-hour drive for El Pollo Loco.
It's clean living. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
The citrus-infused chicken?
Yeah.
Do you want corn or flour? I mean...
I broke my vegetarianism last
Kelly's
weekend.
birthday.
For Kelly's birthday to eat El Pollo Loco chicken.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I love their stuff.
Max, what do you think Jessica said?
I'm open to an El Pollo Loco sponsor. I know
you probably get Los Pollos Hermanos sponsor, that's for sure.
If only there was a real Los Pollos Hermanos. I think they made one once as like a joke place, but I wish that El Pollo just like embraced that. I know. Let me say this. I know that this is wrong. I know Jessica is not going to say that this is her favorite fast food, but I could not think of anything else, and it seemed like the most cliche thing, especially for faculty members living in Southern California. This is like the fast food place, In-N-Out. Am I wrong?
It's Arby's. It's Arby's.
No! Yes.
It is so Arby's. Like, I found one in Irvine. Like, I'm in a Facebook group and someone said, "Who eats at Arby's?" I do.
My goodness.
I don't even like fast food. I love Arby's.
This is such a twist.
I love Arby's. And Bret, for you probably won't remember this. I don't know if they had these in Caseville. Second to Arby's, this is Utah specific. It is this place called Arctic Circle.
Arctic Circle.
For their French fries and their Lime Ricky.
Yes.
But really?
Lime Rickies.
Yes. So
when I was in high school, Arctic Circle offered 5-cent Dr. Peppers, and they forgot to put a limit on how many. So we got like 30 each, and we filled up like a Gatorade jug thing.
Oh my God, you were living on the edge. So yeah, barring Arctic Circle, Arby's is actually my favorite fast food restaurant. And not because my grandpa was kicked in the horse, but my grandmother had a big garden and she always grew horseradish sauce. And so I was always perplexed between what was the difference between this horseradish and this horsey sauce. So I never ate the horsey sauce when I was little. Now that I'm younger, now that I'm older, horseradish sauce. So Arby's.
Well, that was one of my favorite Bonko Party games I think we've ever done. And congratulations, Bret and Allison. You are our winners.
I've never been in conversation with so many people that like Arby's ever.
This is not true because at one point you did sit in my grandparents' living room. Max used to go to Arby's to appease my papa,
That's
so.
True. That is true. I forgot about that. Yeah.
My face is still red that I admitted to Arby's on a national broadcast.
Same.
Max, in case you can see, I'm still bright red.
That's incredible. Is that a Utah thing or a Midwest thing? Arby's? Yeah,
it's a Utah thing. I think it's a Utah thing. Definitely, they have one in Vegas. Like I can tell you where in the country they have them. So I think it's an Intermountain West thing.
Yeah, I think also for me it was that there were really not very many fast food options in Utah when I was growing up, and you sort of had the McDonald's Taco Bell option, but Arby's was like gourmet compared to the other drive-through options, and so it's just living large.
Living large.
That's too funny. All right, so getting back into the more serious questions. Back before COVID times, we saw a Twitter photo of Bret at the then brand spanking new grand opening of the Vanderpump Cocktail Gardens. How was that experience? And would you visit another Lisa Vanderpump restaurant in the post-COVID future?
Well, like everything. Yeah, as I was going to say. Go ahead, Allison.
Yeah, I made that happen. I kind of coerced Bret and our friend and colleague to go there. So that was my doing. Bret was just a little bit more active on Twitter at that time, so he posted it. But I loved it, of course. It was very Lisa Vanderpump. There were, pictures of Jiggy and all of her other animals all over the place, and very complicated and fancy, very overpriced cocktails, as you might imagine. But it felt very LVP. And I can't wait till things open up so that I can go to Tom Tom. That's my goal, to go there.
We would totally join you.
Yes, I would visit another one.
When we went to Tom Tom for my 30th birthday, Lisa Vanderpump walked by us with people walking behind her, and Puffy was on a pillow being carried behind her. The table was so uncomfortable because it was like you were almost sitting on the ground, because it was like sitting at a coffee table on little poofs. But we did have a sighting, and Richardson was working that night. So there were actual cast people there working for real.
Exciting. I'm so jealous.
It was a really strange experience. She came out. It was almost like you were watching her on It's a Small World or something. Like, it was like she was like on a conveyor belt, came out, walked around, and then just walked away. It was so strange. And it was like looking at this person, and at first I didn't recognize her. Like, I was just like, where do I know this? And she's a lot smaller in person than at least she appears to be on the show, or at least
just so very petite.
Yeah.
And so the hugest heels, like you cannot tell how high these heels are when you watch the show.
Yeah.
Well, that's a much better story than a visit to the Vegas cocktail garden.
So we've talked a bit about your academic journey, Bret, but can you tell us about how you came to your current academic project about enslaved people's rebellions in Martinique?
So initially my research centered on Native American history, but I was focusing on the enslavement of Native Americans by French colonists. And so part of that research involved looking at wider practices of slavery in the French Atlantic. And so for my last book, I did talk a little bit about the Caribbean and about sort of the rise of slavery in the French colonies. And when I was doing research for that book, I was in an archive in southern France, and
Bonds
I was looking for something completely different.
Just to plug it, Bonds of Alliance, right?
Oh, hey, thanks. Yeah, that's it.
Sorry
to
interrupt.
I was just thumbing through a big collection of documents that was just kind of random. It was an 18th century French Caribbean guy who put all these together, like 200 plus volumes. And so it's just random. So I'm thumbing through hundreds of pages, and all of a sudden I came across these interrogations of enslaved people and Maroons and free people of color who have been involved in this uprising. And it turned out to be like 80 plus pages of firsthand testimony where they were talking about really intimate things, things like, where they grew their garden vegetables and how they traded it with other people and who they were in relationships with and why they ran from their master and why they, were deciding to rise up. And it just became such a rich source that, for this early period in Caribbean history, we have, a lot of stuff about laws and about sugar production, but there's very little about the human, individual, community, and relationships and experiences. So it just really drew me in. And then once I finished the other book, I kind of went back to this.
That's great. That's so exciting to have a source like that.
Yeah, it's like the historian's dream, right?
Yeah.
And as our friendship has deepened, Bret, and I followed you on Twitter or we talk on Facebook, I remember that you posted part of your new research, or what then became old research ?
Yeah.
But I've been enjoying some of your research finds as you post them on social media.
So how have you both navigated this past pandemic year with teaching, research, and writing, general pandemic life? Are there new research writing obstacles because of COVID? Does it help that it's both of you going through it together, or is it, does it amplify frustrations?
Do you want me to start,
Allison,
Bret?
you want to start? Yeah.
Sure. Well, to answer your last question first, it does help. It helps to kind of be dealing with all of these things together, for sure. I don't know how I would kind of handle the stress of kind of that, lockdown and just the kind of complications with getting work done without Bret. So I'm definitely grateful for that. But just like everyone else, COVID's put a lot of things on hold. I was supposed to spend June through December of 2020 on a research fellowship in Washington, D.C., and that didn't happen. Trying to figure out how to teach on Zoom, and with empathy and understanding for what students are going through, that has been a challenge for sure. I definitely miss being in the classroom, and I know the students do too. But I'm just trying to get done what I can get done. So got through a bunch of research and finalized some databases, over the course of the last couple months, and just trying to get some writing done as I can in the midst of teaching and everything else that is happening. But it's definitely changed things, and it's slowed progress down more than I think all of us had hoped it would. So.
Yeah, I was saying it's true for me. It's definitely true that having Allison, who understands the particular challenges that I'm going through, professionally, and we can talk about it in ways that, we don't really have to explain a lot of it because we get it. That's been a real benefit. For me, the hardest thing has been the isolation of it. I thrive on social interaction, and it's just been really, really hard to, we've been pretty strict, and we haven't had friends in our house for, over about a year now. And it's been isolating and difficult. But that said, we are in a pretty privileged position. We're at a job that allowed us to continue working. We didn't lose our pay. We didn't lose our health insurance. We've had nobody in our immediate family, knock on wood, get COVID. And so in the grand scheme of things, we've been very, very fortunate. I've been department chair for this period, and that's been really interesting and difficult because, the constant uncertainty and shifting landscape means that we have to redo, like we redid our course schedule last quarter, I think 4 times for the entire department. And so that's been a real drain on my resources and my sanity. But, overall it's been, annoying and difficult, but not tragic like it has been for so many.
Thank you. So part of this conversation came out of Bret's email to us of a New Yorker article by Doreen St. Felix titled "The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City is Culturally Sensitive Trash." Can we unpack this notion of culturally sensitive trash and the ways that SLC is different, or maybe not so much, from other Real Housewives franchises?
Bret, you want to go first here?
Sure. I can't really speak to the other Housewives franchises because this is the one and only that I've ever watched. But what I can say, so that the article really struck me because it dealt with this notion of, culturally sensitive trash, meaning that like they're not pretending it's highbrow, they're not pretending it's anything other than what it is. But there was an effort by many of the people to grapple with religion, to grapple with race, to grapple with issues of I don't know what it is. It's not really class, but sort of background. And so, it was the most diverse cast, apparently, of all of the Housewife franchises. And so that meant that there were conversations, I think, across divides that you might not have seen in other series. And so I'm not sure that really answers the question, but it's sort of what I've got.
Have you noticed dynamics of racism and colonialism that sort of, as they relate to SLC, getting portrayed in the show?
I mean, certainly, because for one thing, the fact that Meredith seemed so shocked that Jen and Mary would talk about racism. And the great horror to her was that someone got called a racist, or not even called a racist, but insinuated that they had done something racist. And so she's like, I can't believe you do that. And as though the naming of the problem was worse than the problem itself.
Right.
And that, of course, is a very common thing in my experience, not just in Utah, but everywhere. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting that I thought quite a bit about was the sort of colonial relationship with Tonga, for example. Yeah. Mormonism is, I think it's 1 in 8 Tongans is a Mormon. So it's like maybe the 3rd biggest religion, maybe even the 2nd biggest religion there. And it's obviously embedded in this colonizing of the Pacific by the United States. And so you definitely see the outgrowth of that. And then, there's the general lack of acknowledgement of privilege and of what that comes from, and the sort of legacies of dispossession. And they've dealt with that with Mormonism, right? They completely overlooked the question of racism in Mormonism. And they, of course, didn't talk about how the fact that Utah was, populated by Native people before the Mormons came. And so, those are the kind of resonances that I saw.
So
I'm just shaking my head. I'm bobbing my head. Yeah. Well stated.
I think that my next question is building off of this culturally sensitive trash article and notion, in that as I watched Salt Lake City, perhaps more than any Real Housewife franchise, I felt like it offered a lot of different entry points into various topics and themes in like a U.S. history survey course. And so I was wondering if this was something that jumped out for others, or am I giving way too much credit to Salt Lake City? What did you guys think?
I didn't really think about it as I was watching, but then you brought it up. And so then I started thinking about it, and I think you're right. And I think it tacks on to kind of this discussion of this, New Yorker piece about racism, colonialism, but there's also, class and social standing and power and migration, right? You've got Heather's tagline with "My Pioneer Ancestors," and so kind of the movement into Utah and this space. And then, of course, obviously religion plays a big role here. So I do think in ways that some other franchises don't, there are topics and themes that could relate, more closely to themes that we teach and look at in the survey. So now you have me thinking about that and, teaching a U.S. history survey through the lens of Real Housewives. I don't think I'd get many students to sign on, and I'm not sure my department chair would allow it. So,
what do you think, Bret?
I definitely see
your knowledge of one show.
The depth is pretty amazing. I definitely see the resonances of many of the themes that I emphasize in my teaching. There's obvious resonances with histories of race and privilege. There's also gender was just really interesting to me in this, the different relationships between the couples, and how they were scripted in terms of gender. For example, Lisa's husband was terrified of her, just absolutely in terror. He tries to bring something up and he ducks his head like he's going to get swatted with a newspaper. And that was an interesting gender dynamic. And, she was willing to compare herself to Warren Buffett and to say, no one's asking you to slow your business down. You're asking me to slow my business down, right? And so, even though I think she was kind of rude and overbearing to a lot of people, I do take that as sort of an interesting entry point for discussing gender and sort of what's expected of her versus what's expected of him. Mm-hmm. And then I think the other thing for me was the idea of, I guess really the idea of Heather's sort of dual approach to, I guess to ideals of femininity, to ideals of, the body, because on the one hand, she'll wear a t-shirt and be completely comfortable in her own skin. But on the other hand, her entire business depends on women, mostly women, feeling that they aren't good enough and they need to be made better. And those kind of dynamics, I think, are pretty interesting to explore.
Great. Thanks. Casey, I feel like I have to give a professor fail, a Bravo-demic fail to myself, because I've been teaching 19th century history this quarter, and I could have used Salt Lake. We've been watching it since November.
Unbelievable.
How did I miss this? In fact, Casey was my guest lecturer for the West because COVID had caught up to me. Not COVID itself, but the pandemic had caught up to me. And I just could not pull something together the week we did the West. Casey, I failed twice. I did an assignment to Real Housewives of Salt Lake, and I had to borrow a lecture from you. I failed as a Bravo-demic this quarter. That is terrible. It would have been perfect. Instead of texting and tweeting the TV and the screen and that Max and Casey, I could have used it in my class. So I failed, but you could have done I could have done railroads, image making, blacks in the West, race, religion, Great Awakening. I just listed every way I failed in this assignment.
I mean, there was also some temperance going on.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Oh, sure.
I failed.
Yeah, that speakeasy, right?
Right. Now I'm like, can I wrap an episode into week 10 of 10 for next week? I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to let it go. But wow, 3 times I've been embarrassed here. 1, as a young undergrad at the University of Utah. 2, someone who eats Arby's. And 3, someone who didn't assign the most obvious thing in front of her. So we're going to switch gears. So we know that I just failed as a Bravo-demic. We know that Allison is a Bravo-demic. But Bret, since your current project is digging into issues of hearsay, rumor, and trust, have you found yourself becoming more of a self-proclaimed Bravo-demic? Are you watching more reality TV? And if so, or if not, what are your go-to shows?
The answer is no. I guess I probably shouldn't say that here, but I find personally the reason I don't is not because I think it's lowbrow or because I'm better than it. It's because it stresses me out. The conflict is really difficult for me. I get in there and I have a hard time distancing myself from it and laughing at it because it just feels real and it feels so. I have a really hard time enjoying from a sort of distance perspective. But I did find it really fascinating when I was watching this because I've been writing about these different maroon communities in Martinique, and there's always the question of who can you trust and whose account of things do you trust and who do you let in and who do you keep out. So the dynamics are really complex in any setting, and it did make me think about that for sure. But I kind of doubt that I'm going to be diving in again anytime soon because it's just emotionally taxing for me.
That's an honest answer. We've kind of talked about this, but I feel like we can't leave. Well, let me go back. What are your go-to shows? Do you have any go-to shows, Bret?
Yeah, certainly. We've watched a lot of TV since the pandemic started. A couple of the favorites, Schitt's Creek was absolutely one of our favorites in recent memory. I've seen a few other series that I've really quite enjoyed, but I really haven't done reality TV except for this.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay. No, that's fine. That's one part of the household. Allison, have you become more invested, less invested in reality TV, and what are your shows?
I think I'm probably equally invested in reality TV. I'll watch anything that's on Bravo. For the most part, we saw as we were making our way through Salt Lake, there was a preview for Summer House new season, and I said, "Oh, great, Summer House!" And Bret said, "Well, how did you even know that?" And just because I know these things, unfortunately. But in terms of other shows, the new season of Queen Sugar has started, and we have set our DVR for that, and I'm very excited for the new season of that show. We very much enjoy watching that one, so that's another thing kind of on our list.
I enjoy watching Ralph Angel. I mean Queen Sugar as well. Okay.
He makes me feel insecure.
He makes a lot of people feel insecure. Just go look at the internet of pictures of him without his beard. You'll feel much better.
Interesting.
So, Allison, in your Bravo-demic expert analysis, how do you feel Salt Lake City stacked up against other Real Housewives franchises, and what do you want to see in season 2?
Yeah, I thought this was a great first season. I thought they hit the ground running with the Smells Like Hospital conflict, and then at the end with the Vegas trip, and their visit to that woman's house with the giant pillows on her couch. I don't know where you find pillows that big, but but I thought it was a really good first season. And like I said before, I think they'd all done their homework and knew the kind of images they wanted to portray and the things they wanted to do. And I don't really know what to expect from season 2. I don't know who's going to arrive. Is it going to be their reunion selves, or is it going to be their regular season selves? And I think that could be interesting to unpack and to watch how that unfolds. I'm not certain I need Meredith to come back, but I'd like to see everybody else for sure come back.
Are there any housewives? I mean, you just said Meredith, but are there any other housewives who you do think will not make the cut?
I don't know now, like what Casey brought up before with this new footage and video about Jen. I don't know if they're going to want to leave her in the cast or go another direction. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think they can't do without Mary Cosby. I think she just brings too much to the table that they won't. If she wants to do it, I think they'll certainly have her back.
Do you think as a full-time member this time?
Yeah, I think so. If she's willing, if she wants to film anywhere but her closet, I think they would be happy for that.
Did her closet overwhelm you too? Jessica and I have texted about this so much that like it's high-end fashion, but it's like so overwhelming to see her film in her closet.
Yeah, a little hoarderish.
Yes, for sure. When Whitney said she was a high-end hoarder, I absolutely agreed with that.
Wow. Okay, I don't disagree.
Allison and Bret, tell us what's next for you and what you want people to know about your upcoming work. How can they get a hold of you if they want to know more?
Bret, you go ahead first.
Okay. What's up next for me is finishing up being department chair. Thank heavens. I'm going to be finishing a book about the French Atlantic in this next year, and working on this project about Martinique. So people can find me by looking at my website that is on the history department webpage at the University of Oregon. And I used to be on Twitter, but I've kind of left Twitter for the last several months, and I don't really miss it, but at some point I might go back. So I think the website and email are the best ways.
Okay. And as for me, I'm just working on my book on freedom and the law in 18th century Virginia, and getting that ready to go and submitted to UVA Press, who will publish it once it's done. So that's kind of the main thing on my to-do list. And I have signed off of all social media as of December. So the best way to get in touch with me is at my email, my amadar@uoregon.edu, and you can find more information about my work and my research at my faculty page on the University of Oregon website.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This was an absolutely wonderful discussion.
Yep. Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah,
it was
fun.
great. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks.
So here's my
If
follow-up
only,
question.
Jessica, we didn't have to admit Arby's.
I mean, I'm not ashamed of it. So my last question, and it has the interview. We're over. We're 1 minute into your time. So who do you all root for in the Pac-12 sports? The Ducks or the Utah Utes?
It's for me. Anyway.
Good answer.
Yeah, and I've kind of
Allison?
adopted them too. I've adopted them as well. So
Oh, you're my people.
I was an
Wonderful.
Ohio
Yeah.
State fan, though.
I
Do you take
Yeah,
Utah over the
yeah.
Bruins, Jessica?
I have to, because I always go for the underdog. But it's always a problem because when Utah now plays UCLA, I have two chairs in my house, one a Utah chair, one a UCLA chair, and it's really a problem. I'm not sad when Utah wins. I'm not sad when Utah wins.
Wow.
Sorry.
Yeah, last year the Pac-12 championship was Utah, Oregon. Not this season, but last season. And so I was teaching the survey. I had 240 students or something like that, and I wore a Utah shirt the day before the game. And of course, they did not do well. So when I came back to the final, the students were just relentless. They let me know that I had jinxed my team and it was my fault, and they loved it.
Oh, wow. Mean. Okay, so thank you both. We're not going to take any more of your time. I have no more questions that are irrelevant.
As always, you can find us at historiansonhousewives.com, where you can propose your own episode topic, ask us questions, and send us feedback. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at historiansh. And don't forget that you can like and review the podcast on your podcast platform. You can also find us now at our Etsy shop, Historians Housewives. This episode was powered by Acast. Thank you, Allison Madar and Bret Rushforth. This show was brought to you with the support by Barbara and Mark Spear, Saddleback Community College, Molly Callahan, Dr. Joaquin Galarza, Courtney Crow, Lara Loper, Kim Bettendorf, Luis Acio de Dios, and the Agipong Foundation. And remember, scholars do bravo too.
We can do another one on this reel just to
Run
so
it.
that I have two.
All the attitude.
Yeah, let me get
Fussy,
some
fussy,
attitude.
fussy.
I don't feel fussy. I think that's it. I'm not feeling fussy.
You want me to put on like Madonna or something?
No, I just want to.
Do we look like the Madonna group to you?
Sorry, you want me to put on like Janet?
Not the 60-year-old Madonna. No, let's do it again. Let me just give you fussy.